bringing you 5 players that you need to let your Airhead Leaguemates draft in 2025. Don't fall into the trap. Before we get into it, we are on the way to 1,000 subscribers here on the new 4for4 Fantasy Football YouTube channel. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. It helps us out a ton. We're going to be answering all your start-sit questions this season. And if you want access to all sorts of great rankings, all sorts of great information, use code YouTube on the 4for4 website. Get you 25% off any plan. Now, starting it off, let's start off with player number 1 that you should be letting your Airhead Leaguemates draft in 2025. It is going to be James Cook. And when I think of your Airhead Leaguemates, I always think of that commercial of the Airhead, you know, the candy that you had where guy walking around with the big red kind of blowing up. Like there was all those funny commercials as a kid. And James Cook is one of those where I just think he could absolutely explode, and not in a good way. James Cook, of course, gets the contract extension this offseason after potentially looking like he might be a holdout. And I understand last year had 18 total touchdowns in the 16 games that he played. He was pretty much the most reliable weapon next to Josh Allen in that Buffalo Bills offense. My issue with James Cook specifically is the fact that he was RB11 on a points per game basis. If we're looking at it, 16.7 fantasy points per game. And when you look with 18 total touchdowns, 207 rushing attempts for almost 1,000 yards, 32 receptions, he only had a 49.2% snap share, which was the RB35 on a snap share basis. Now, we could maybe argue, maybe James Cook with this extension, he continues to go up with snap share, because this year it's pretty much just Ray Davis currently at this current moment behind James Cook. He seemingly should get more opportunities. Maybe he gets into, you know, the 60s, the 70% when it comes to snap share. If we look back in 2023, though, he did have a 55.1% snap share. So it's not like we've seen him get above a 60% snap share in his career. So it's kind of hard to predict that from a guy like a James Cook. So for me, the reason that I think you should let your Airhead Leaguemates draft James Cook is there's a lot more that could go wrong. The Bills might not give, you know, James Cook 18 total touchdowns. Josh Allen might have just some more passing touchdowns, some more rushing touchdowns. He's always there. He's a threat in those, you know, red zone situations. I just don't want to be tying myself to James Cook. I think it's a little bit overdue. I think his floor, like I said, I think you're drafting him 12, 13. I would much rather be grabbing other players in the same range as James Cook. Because right now, if you look over on the 4for4 composite ADP, when it comes to James Cook, he's currently going off the board as RB13, overall player 33. So some players around him: Garrett Wilson, George Kittle, Amarion Hampton, Mike Evans, Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, I love all those guys more than I like James Cook. I understand running backs, especially in your half PPR formats, they're going to dry up a little bit sooner than you would hope. But James Cook is a guy that I am not drafting in 2025 fantasy football. The next guy that I am letting my Airhead dumb league mates draft this season, it is going to be Terry Scary McLaurin for the Washington Commanders. And we're looking at Scary Terry. He's coming off the board as wide receiver 19, overall player 43 on the multi-site composite ADP on 4for4. And maybe a little bit of, we've seen his ADP go up in the past few days, mainly just because I think there's a little bit more optimism about that contract getting done for Scary Terry. But as somebody that I know you guys always say there's a little bit of Buckeye bias in some of my takes, this one's not biased. I am not drafting Terry McLaurin in 2025. And the main reason is last year we saw an absolutely insane growth for Scary Terry with Jane Daniels, who is the best quarterback that Scary Terry has played with in his whole career. He put up 13 total receiving touchdowns, which is an absolute anomaly if you look at his whole career receiving touchdowns. 2023 only had 4, 5, 5, 4, 7 in his career. And then all of a sudden in 2024, that goes up to 13. Now, I don't think Jaden Daniels is absolutely about to become trash. I think he's still going to be a very solid quarterback. I think Jaden Daniels is a top 3 fantasy football QB. I don't think that's a hot take, but what the hot take is that even though Scary Terry had 13 total receiving touchdowns last season, only put up 15.8 fantasy points per game. That was wide receiver 14 on a points per game basis with 117 targets. It's not like Terry McLaurin was an absolute alpha dominant target hog getting 130 plus targets. 117 targets. If you take a look at that overall target share, was only a 23.3% target share. Like we said, we like to see alpha level wide receivers get above a 25% target share. Only wide receiver 19 in targets. Wasn't terrible, wasn't great. So for me, when we're looking at him, of course, he lives on those deep targets. He was a wide receiver 7 in air yards. A lot has to go right for Terry McLaurin to return on his current overall value. Like we said, he's being priced a little bit lower. I think some people are pretty much concerned, like I am, that Scary Terry's not going to be able to return on this value with wide receiver 19. But if we kind of saw last season his absolute ceiling with touchdowns being wide receiver 14, I feel like, yes, you're maybe getting a slight discount, but he could kind of go back to being that wide receiver 22, wide receiver 20 type wide receiver. And then it just doesn't feel as good, as there's some other guys in the similar range that I think could be going way higher when we're looking specifically like an Alvin Kamara. You can make the case. We've seen, top 5 points per game upside, even though the Saints offense absolutely stinks. You got Joe Burrow going in the same range, Kenneth Walker, DJ Moore, Chuba Hubbard, Xavier Worthy in that Kansas City Chiefs offense. I know there's a little bit of worry with Rashee Rice, but those are the guys that I kind of prefer, all those guys in that range to Terry McLaurin. I understand 4th round wide receiver. You're like, hey, if he kind of could return on some decent value, if maybe the Commanders even take a step. But let's not forget, Deebo Samuel also gets added into this offense. For me, I'm going to be taking a breath, letting my idiot Airhead Leaguemates draft Terry McLaurin in 2025. My third player that you need to let your Airhead Leaguemates draft in 2025 fantasy football, it is going to be DeVonta Smith for the Philadelphia Eagles. And Mr. DeVonta Smith, I feel like he's still living a little bit off that hype that he had as being a Heisman, winner, and for what he did at Alabama. Coming into the NFL, DeVonta Smith drafted with that 1st round level pedigree. He hasn't been terrible, but he hasn't been absolutely great. We're talking about a guy that has finished with 14.2, and 15.3 fantasy points per game, wide receiver 14, wide receiver 20, and wide receiver 15. And you're going to say to me, Caleb, why the heck are you hating on DeVonta Smith? DeVonta Smith is a talented wide receiver. We've seen him absolutely return value. And when you look at his overall ranking right now on the 4for4 composite ADP, he's fallen in as wide receiver 24. So if he finishes like he did the last 3 seasons, this value is absolutely incredible. This is why you need to let your Airhead Leaguemates draft DeVonta Smith. The big thing when you look at his overall production numbers when it comes to ultimate level upside, when we're kind of sitting here, even at wide receiver 24, is when you look at his kind of splits with A.J. Brown and without A.J. Brown. I think a lot of people would say that if something were to happen to A.J. Brown, that would absolutely take the top off for DeVonta Smith. In the games that he has played without A.J. Brown, he has only gone up about 2 fantasy points more in full PPR. So he went from 14.57 fantasy points over the last 2 seasons playing with A.J. Brown to 17.75 fantasy points in full PPR without A.J. Brown. What this continues to tell me is that this Philadelphia Eagles team is so reliant on the running attack that DeVonta Smith, as much as we love everything that we're seeing from Mr. DeVonta, I just can't be taking a shot because I don't think there is ultimate, especially when you're sitting there in the 4th round, league winning upside. Yes. Do you need solid fantasy football point contributors? 100%. And if we're talking about that overall points per game, I'm sure you could 100% be making the argument that it's a little bit safer. Like DeVonta Smith is safer than a Tedero McMillan, who they're going right now back to back in the 4for4 composite ADP. But Tedero McMillan hits his full ceiling. We could be talking about a top 10 wide receiver in full points per game for Mr. Tedero McMillan, compared to DeVonta Smith, who we kind of know who he is. He's kind of just a wide receiver 2 at this point in his career. And unless we see the Philadelphia Eagles absolutely change course, absolutely get into situations where they're having to throw the ball a ton late in games, I just don't think the return when we're looking at who's going around him. You're still taking Cortland Sutton, Trevion Henderson, James Conner, Tet McMillan, Jamison Williams, George Pickens. Like, I prefer all those guys over DeVonta Smith, and maybe I'll get burned. Maybe the talent, I'm not doubting the talent of DeVonta Smith. Like, we know that he could be that guy in a potential more pass-happy offense. I just can't be drafting him. Let your airhead league mates draft DeVonta Smith. I will not be on the DeVonta Smith train. I understand maybe you got the Jalen Hurts, and you somehow DeVonta Smith falls into the 5th round, and then you get DeVonta Smith and you get the stack. Maybe then I could see it, but I would much rather be taking these other players in the same ballpark range than DeVonta Smith. Let your airhead league mates draft DeVonta Smith in 2025. The next guy that I'm letting my airhead league mates draft in 2025, it's going to be Zay Flowers for the Baltimore Ravens. And you're going to say to me, Caleb, maybe you just hate wide receiver 2s. And that might be the case, but Zay Flowers is currently going off the board, wide receiver 28, overall player 57. And what has Zay Flowers done in his 2 years in the NFL? Wide receiver 31, wide receiver 32 on a points per game basis. Nothing great. 12.9, 12.3. That is not winning you any type of leagues. And you would think 2 years of finishing kind of in a wide receiver 30 on a points per game basis would give Zay Flowers a little bit of a discount. And it has not. He's actually wide receiver 28 this season right now on the multi-site composite ADP, which means that some sites he's going higher, some sites he might be going a little bit lower. But why are we drafting him with what we've kind of seen? Nothing in his situation has changed. We still have Lamar Jackson throwing the ball. We still have Derrick Henry in the backfield. I understand they didn't add another really elite level wide receiver. I understand Isaiah likely is a little injured as they head into camp. But Zay Flowers has not proven in his career that he can be a top stud level wide receiver. Now, we have been blessed with rookie level wide receivers breaking out. We've seen some recent year 2 wide receivers break out. Maybe Zay Flowers is following the year 3 kind of very old model of year 3 is when these wide receivers fully break out. I just think similar to DeVonta Smith, he's just playing in such a run-heavy team that's been the identity for the Baltimore Ravens over the last few years, that they spread the ball enough around when it comes to the passing attack that Zay Flowers probably a little bit better of a best ball pick, where he probably is going to have some major spike weeks, where if you look kind of at his historical games, even from like last season, 22, 5, 2, 19, 22, 4, 18.5, 29, 7, 11, 11, 10, 11, 15, 5, 3. Like, those were his points per game outputs throughout the whole entire season. So, yes, when the ceiling was good, the ceiling was good. He looked like, young Antonio Brown type vibes. But then the floor was absolutely horrific and absolutely lost you weeks when he absolutely kind of put up those very, very single digit below 5 fantasy football point numbers. And so for me, I just don't like the variance. I understand fantasy football has variance, but when you're in the same range as like we said, George Pickens is going a few picks above, Sam Laporta, Rashee Rice, even though there's that looming suspension, give me Rashee Rice, who we saw put up top 8 fantasy points per game numbers over Zay Flowers. Give me a Calvin Ridley with a new and improved offense for the Titans with Cam Ward, RJ Harvey in that same range. I just think there are players in this range that have higher level outcomes than Zay Flowers, and I want to be taking a shot on these players. Definitely avoid Zay Flowers. Let your airhead league mates draft him in 2025 fantasy football. My 5th and last airhead player to let your airhead idiot league mates draft in 2025, it is going to be Brian Robinson. And if you're still here in this video and you haven't hit the like button or subscribe button, please do. We are on the way to 500 total subscribers, actually 1,000 here on the new 4for4 Fantasy Football YouTube channel. And Brian Robinson specifically, not enough of your league mates are going to have been following the preseason, and not enough of them are going to know the hype that is JCM, Jacoby Croskett Merritt. And when we're looking at JCM, of course, does not have the draft pedigree of a running back that we would be worried would be taking away opportunities from Brian Robinson. But there's all the rumors, all the reports out there that they are looking to kind of move on to trade Brian Robinson. And if that's the case, and that's how they're viewing him, and they're viewing their backfield as Brian Robinson might not be a part of it, then why am I selecting him as RB30 overall, where there's guys around him like a Tyrone Tracy, like a Jordan Addison, even though he's getting suspended? If you need a quarterback like a Kyler Murray, Jalen Warren, Evan Ingram, Juwan Jennings, David Njoku, Matthew Golden, and Emeka Ibuka, he'll continue to rise here. I think it's a little bit low here on the 4-for-4 composite currently right now. But what I guess I'm trying to say is Brian Robinson is somebody that I just don't want a piece of. And a lot of your league mates, if they're looking at depth charts currently with ESPN, I mean, Brian Robinson is slotted in to be the starter. Understand the last 2 years, running back 22, running back 28 on a points per game basis, been pretty durable, 14, 15 games over the last 2 seasons. I just think there's a lack of explosion that Brian Robinson, and that's kind of always been in his profile, even since he came into the NFL out of the University of Alabama, that he wasn't I would say he wasn't going to break any big runs. You kind of knew he was in between the tackles, first and second down. He would get you that, 4 yards a carry, but nothing really more, nothing really less. Never has hit 1,000 rushing yards in his career. So I understand maybe they want to go with a little bit more explosive back in the backfield, but Brian Robinson, stay away. Stay away. Let your Airhead league mates draft Brian Robinson. Don't let it be you. We're trying to help you win a fantasy football championship in 2025. So make sure, like I said, you guys stick around the channel. We're going to be answering everybody's start-sit question this season in the comments. So make sure you are here. We're going to be helping you out, help you win a fantasy football championship in 2025. And I will catch you on the next one. Peace.